Well, every time I think I have nailed down one of my favorite records of the year, another one comes and kind of vies for the crown. And even though I've been listening to a lot of pop this year, man, when the metal hits, it hits just right. So, yeah, let's talk about one of my favorite records of this year. Through the Mountains of Melancholia by Luck Won't Save You. So, Luck Won't Save You is a new one for me. They are being touted as a melodic death metal and deathcore band. They were formed originally in Reno, Nevada in 2008. They did disband after they released their first album back in 2010, but then reformed in 2013 and have been steadily releasing albums since then. Now, it's comprised of two individuals, Russell Eck, I believe is how you pronounce it. He performs all the vocals, guitars, bass, and keys, as well as records, mixes, and masters all the albums. So, like, it's kind of a one-man show in that case. But Jared Klein also writes and performs all the drums on this. But he's also pretty busy with Flub, Grindfield, The Undying, and the band that I know him from, which is Rivers of Nile. I think that's how you pronounce it. I always pronounce it as Rivers of Nile, but yeah, so new band for me. New band. These guys came out of nowhere. I was recommended. That's the word I'm looking for. Recommended this group by some of my fans, and yeah, I took a dive into it, and I was just floored. Like, holy jeez. The best way that I could put it is that this is what Between the Buried and Me would sound like if they continued in a traditional death metal, progressive rock landscape after albums like The Parallax and The Great Misdirect. You know, instead of going kind of the direction that they've been going, where I feel like they've just been kind of treading water. I haven't felt this way about an album since I discovered Colors from Between the Buried and Me. Their ability to change on a dime, to create, for me, extremely enjoyable, like, technical death metal music in a, like, extremely enjoyable way. Like, most of the time when I'm listening to death metal, especially proggy death metal like Opeth and whatnot, I'm always kind of waiting for the jams. You know, I'm suffering through and I'm getting into the heaviness, but I'm only just kind of waiting for them to get more proggy, you know? That's how I feel with, like, Blackwater Park and whatnot from Opeth. With this, and especially with Colors, I love the death metal that's found on here. You know, I'm not just waiting for the proggy breakdown or the turn of musical genres in this. I love everything that is found on this record, right from the beginning of Red Mother, Blue Sun, that starts off just entirely brutal. You know, you've got the blast beats, you got the syncopated rhythm styles. Jared is doing an incredible job on the drums that I'm just like, holy geez, somebody tie this guy down. He's going to start flying away. He's like a hummingbird on there. We've got the breakdowns, we've got the chugging. That's where we've got more of that, like, deathcore sounds to it. But right at the midpoint of this 8-minute track, it just breaks itself back down to this absolute brilliant proggy moment. Like, once those keyboards come in kind of out of nowhere, I was like almost grabbed by the throat, and it was like, you're going to listen to this very proggy track and it is just going to knock your socks off. The other thing that I love about this record that kind of takes a page out of the Between the Buried and Me, and I swear this is going to be the last comparison, is that these tracks blend and flow brilliantly from one to the other. Like, Red Mother, Blue Sun goes right into the title track of Through the Mountains of Melancholia, and it does it seamlessly. Like, unless you're following along in the runtime, you don't realize that you're now starting a whole new song. The first track definitely grabbed me, but it was the title track, the second track, that made me pay attention. You know, it made me be like, oh, we're dealing with something special here. We're dealing with something that I particularly love. And again, it's the use of the soundscapes. It's the use of different styles. And I couldn't believe what I was hearing at certain moments, especially, like, we're not even a full 2 minutes into this track, and we're into this very psychedelic, very ethereal movement that just blindsided me. It's like, oh, now we're here. And the transition from the brutal to the more atmospheric is so smooth that you don't realize it's happening until you're already in it. Like I was mentioning about this in my Blood Incantation album review, that I was kind of disappointed that it was a little bit more of a oil and water kind of an essence when we're dealing with these different musical styles. This one is definitely that mosaic where they're blending the different techniques, and sure, they're showing the different areas, but they're also able to blend them together to create a whole new musical experience. One of the things that I love about this group is their ability to build up and to build that momentum, to build that energy. Take, for instance, the third track of The White Myth of the Monolith. Such a great track name, by the way. I love how it starts off, once again, very atmospheric, very slow. We've got those overlays of soundscapes here to really provide the foundation for this track that then builds itself up into that balls to the wall insane. And this is the thing that I love about these types of songs, is that their ability to not just stay up here the whole time and not just stay down there the whole time. They're able to fluctuate, and that's where I'm going with those ebbs and flows within the music. Yeah, absolutely love that. And the 7 minutes just fly by within this track. That brings us to, Wandering the Wayfarer's Woe. And it's interesting that I find like some of the heaviest moments are found on some of the more quiet aspects. Like the beginning point of this is kind of a little bit of a dirge, but man, the headbanging, once you get into it within that rhythm section, really solidifies my love of the kind of music that we've got here. And we're just starting to crest over the halfway mark. And once we come into Necrotic Chant, it's just so inviting and so infectious. Like that groove, that chug that we get into the latter half of this point, just like I can't help but just like headbang around it, like it's inviting. It's got that oomph, it's got that bang. Like so much of the deathcore and like insane stuff, it doesn't really take a moment to allow for a good breakdown. And there's so many moments where I just want to like do that lawnmower startup, and it's found on some of these punchier tracks like Necrotic Chant and Ozu Soul. And then the final couple of tracks, The Needle Points Northward, Aperture Hermit, and Immortal Dreamer, they do a good job of closing the album off. But this is where I come into my only real like negative of this album is like, unlike, if I'm comparing colors, there's no white walls, there's no big finale of this, even though they do have that kind of funeral dirge that we heard from, I think it was like the soundtrack to The Shining, where it has that like durner, 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 kind of like the funeral march. I was kind of expecting and hoping for this big grand finale and this big firework display at the end. And instead, we just kind of get a slow burn, a little bit of a dirge to kind of wrap this album up. And it didn't have that big oomph. It didn't have that big explosion at the end that I was really hoping for. It just has kind of a nice dirge at the end, which is... it's fine, but with all the music that was leading up to it, I was like ready. I'm like, all right, let's go. And it was just, the ending was a little bit of a disappointment. And that's not to say that the Aperture Hermit or the Immortal Dreamer were bad tracks, far from it. It was just, I was waiting for like a White Walls or, a Grand Misdirect or something along those lines, or like Swim to the Moon. But yeah, it was still, holy geez. Like if that's the only negative that I could see within this entire runtime, I think we're dealing with something amazing here. So, Through the Mountains of Melancholia is one that I've been returning to time and time and time again. I've had to pry myself away from this album so I can listen to other albums that I need to listen to. Like I have a spreadsheet of over 20 albums that I want to get reviews out before like the end of this month. I'm not going to make it. But I keep finding myself coming back to this one. So yeah, if you're a fan of progressive metal, if you're a fan of that deathcore, if you're a fan of this kind of like experimental Between the Buried and Me style of music, you got to check this one out. And in the end, I will say Through the Mountains of Melancholia by Luck Won't Save You is an album I absolutely love with my whole heart. Like this album is definitely scratching at that masterpiece status. And who knows, maybe at the end of the year, I will retroactively give it the masterpiece status. But as it sits right now, it's just an album that I love with my whole heart. This one gets a very easy double thumbs, note, seal of approval. This is a run, don't walk if you haven't listened to it. Again, know that it's a deathcore record. Know that it is a progressive death metal record. So if you're not a fan of that, I would still say give this a try because there are moments on here that I think anybody can enjoy. But just know that, about 75% of this record is going to be blast beats. So that's what I've got of Through the Mountain of Melancholia by Luck Won't Save You. What did you guys think about this record? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Whatever you thought, please let me know by commenting down below. And that's where I'm going to leave you today. So thank you all so much for watching. As always, you guys are definitely the best. And until next time, notes out.